Hi everyone, welcome to Part of Cultura. My name is Natalia. I will be guiding you through this podcast today. This should be episode 7 by now, which is kind of crazy that we've already come out with 7 episodes. So if you're new to the podcast, this is a podcast made by LFTA, the Latinx Film and Theater Association. And we basically decided to start a podcast because during coronavirus, we weren't able to come all together and produce one of our greatest productions of the year, Night of Cultura. So we decided to make a podcast where we could all come together as a club and share our experiences really related to film and theater, and kind of to educate our listeners. So without further ado, for this week, we are planning on talking about Latinx films and representation in Latinx cinema, Latinx directors, screenwriters, and anything Latinx related in the industry. We'll introduce ourselves. So again, my name is Natalia. Everyone in the club basically calls me Nat. I'm a second year film and television major at UCLA. Basically, I joined the org just because I wanted to meet other Latinx people that are interested in film, and I really want to go into screenwriting and cinematography. And then I'll let everyone else introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Maria. I actually graduated from UCLA back in June. I was a psychology major with a double minor in Chicano studies and film, television, digital media. So I joined LFTA because I wanted to have a chance to be creative with other Latinos so that we can put our stories out there into the world. And it became a really cool family. Our stories are just being told through us.
Hi, my name's Leslie, and I'm a fourth-year film major. I do screenwriting and animation stuff. And yeah, I just joined this group because I really wanted to be actually involved in something, with it being my 4th year and with COVID and everything, I was like, dang, this is it. This is the whole college experience I'm gonna have. So I thought that it'd be nice to get involved with something creative and maybe learn more about, Latinx film and stuff like that. I was really surprised too, LFTA does a lot of stuff, very productive group, and I think it's super fun. So I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, so this episode, it's kind of the first one where we actually talk about film and Latinx film. We've been talking about spooky stories, everything October, just because we just came out of spooky season. But I think now we are getting to the point where it's time to talk about film. So I think just to get to know everyone a little bit better, what are some of your guys' favorite films? And, specifically talking about the Latinx community, any Latinx screenwriters or directors that really stand out to you?
I guess one film that I just recently saw that has become, I guess, one of my favorites. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's called Ya no estoy aquí, a film by Fernando Frias de la Parra. And I thought it was just it was just a really cool film. There was just a lot of kind of little things that you can catch in there. Have you guys heard of the film?
Is it on Netflix? I feel like I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's on Netflix. It's also
What is
it's
it
also
about again?
it follows a 17-year-old guy who lives in Monterrey. His name is Ulises. Basically, it's kind of talking about this period of time that it was kind of like a trend that came and went about they were called the Colombias. They were really into cumbia music, and they were kind of grouped into groups basically.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a misunderstanding with a gang, and then there was a shooting. It's I don't want to give away everything if you guys haven't watched it, but
Right.
he basically has to immigrate into the US, and it kind of just follows his story of him trying to keep his identity of what he thought his identity was so grounded in that of being a part of his group back in Monterrey, and that trying to keep that while in a strange land and trying to defend it. I did see another interview, not an interview, but a discussion that Guillermo del Toro and I believe it's Alfonso Cuarón had
Mm-hmm.
talking about that, and I thought it was really interesting.
And I think from I had started watching that, or had watched part of that film, but isn't like a big, kind of like the main plot of it is he becomes friends with, I think, a Chinese American girl, right?
Yeah, when he comes over here, yeah.
Right, and it's like she's trying to show him around basically how to live in the US, which
Hmm.
I thought was really interesting because it kind of reminded me of that friendship duo that no one would expect, but really that only films can bring into existence, if you know what I mean. So
Hmm.
I thought the whole plot itself was just extremely unique and just told a really special story. So now I really want to rewatch it again just because I know it has something really special in it. But yeah, I know you had mentioned Alfonso Cuarón, and he is probably my favorite director, period. And I think he has so many amazing films. I really like his earlier films, but I think my ultimate favorite one that he's done so far is Roma. And that just, it really hits home for me because I was born in Mexico City. My family's from Mexico City, and the film takes place in Mexico City basically when, my dad grew up there. So watching it kind of reminds me of home a lot. I don't know if you guys have seen it.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I feel like my mom especially also like really connected to it because it's her generation, and obviously Alfonso Cuarón's generation is basically his own kind of autobiography
right.
that centers around his maid and everything, and it really captures the time of like Mexico in the 1970s.
Yeah. So for our listeners, if you don't know what the story is about, basically the plot is about this she's a nanny for a rich family, a high middle class family in Mexico City. Her name is Cleo, and she's, I guess, the indigenous origins. It's about her relationship with the family, basically, and everything that the family goes through and how Cleo basically becomes part of this family. And like Leslie said, it's kind of based off of Alfonso Cuarón's story, and basically what his memories as a child when when he was living in Mexico City, because it's normal in Mexico if you're of a high middle class family to have a nanny and a maid, and usually that nanny raises you since you're a child. So in a sense, they basically become a mother figure to you. So that's basically what this film is about. I think just that film has so many special elements to it. So I highly recommend. But Leslie, I don't know what's your favorite Latinx film, if you have any specifically.
So I think honestly my favorite Latinx film it's not super well known, but it's called Central Station, and it's from Brazil, not Hispanic, but
Yeah.
Latinx.
Uh-huh.
It's something that I can come back to, and like every time I feel something. It's just like a really rich story. Basically, what happens in it is there is, this train station, everyone goes through it, and everyone has their own stories, right? And there's this one retired teacher named Dora, and she's played by Fernanda Montenegro. I think she got an award for it too. So yeah, she's this retired teacher, and she has to write letters for people who are illiterate in order to make extra money and make ends meet. So then one day there's this like mother and her child that like write a letter to this like husband that like left. After they leave, the kid gets distracted by his toy. He like walks over to get it, and the mom gets hit by a bus and dies. So
Uh,
so then
that was a
yeah,
Gosh.
spoiler.
yeah. Well, it's kind of a hard film to find, but so then the teacher has to, I guess this is my problem now.
Hmm.
And so it follows the story of like him wanting to find his father.
Wow. I've never heard of that story before or that movie, but dang, now I really want to watch that.
Yeah, it's an incredibly dark. Like I just went over the first few minutes of it. So like I didn't go too deep into it, but
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's just an incredibly dark, gritty film. Like everything that can go wrong goes wrong, yet you still feel like happy, and like you feel this like hopefulness at the end. And it's just it's very sentimental. It's a
Yeah.
very good drama film.
And you said it was Brazilian, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Came out in 1998.
I feel like there's so many. I don't really know a lot about Brazilian films, but the one film I know, it's pretty well known if you're a cinephile, but it's called City of God. I don't know if you guys have seen it.
Yeah, I've seen
I've
part of that one.
Oh my
I've been meaning
gosh.
to
heard of
finish it.
It's a fantastic film. Oh my gosh. Just thinking about it, I'm like getting chills. There's so many stories out there that are just kind of hidden, kind of like City of God, I feel like, and all the films that we've been talking about. But yeah, that's another Brazilian film that, or one of the only ones I really know about.
That's a very good one to know.
Yeah.
It's really good.
But I think what's interesting about kind of all the films that we've been talking about, and I feel like this is kind of a unique quality to just Latinx films in general. They're not like your big Hollywood blockbusters. I don't feel like you find really that many type of action, adventure films in Latinx cinema. It's mostly just stories of individuals. Unless I'm wrong, but that's kind of what I've just thought about just now, and kind of, going through like all the Latinx films that I've, seen. It's, you don't really find anything like The Avengers or anything like that. It's more just, yeah, I guess about journeys, individual people, their stories, and overcoming their challenges.
I do agree with you that a lot of stories are like, which I think is really unique, and just like to be able to connect with these characters at a personal level. I do want to point though that I don't know if you guys, I'm pretty sure you guys have heard of like Robert Rodriguez, and like his stories are often pretty action packed, which I think is cool. I think especially for me personally, I guess growing up with like something like Spy Kids, I know it's like probably not like super
Oh
like,
yeah.
but like Spy Kids was like just growing up and seeing that. I remember like hearing the name, like their last name was Cortez. And to
Yeah,
me, like that was so cool because like
it
I
was.
just don't know how to explain that. Like
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
just
You definitely felt a connection to them. Like I think that's the most basic way to explain it, but I completely understand what you mean.
I guess it's kind of like seeing not only like people that who are Latino, but like kids who are Latino. Like, and just with a lot of his other films are also like, I guess he's the director that most movies that I've watched before. I guess like, like El Mariachi, Desperado, Once Upon a Time in Mexico,
Right, yeah.
like a lot of those, like it's also cool to see those kinds of things because I know that in Hollywood it's a lot of like, mainstream media is like sometimes like, a lot of action, like you said, like Avengers and things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
to see like Latinx people also doing those roles is also cool. Like just to see them in those roles that sometimes can often just be taken by a lot of white actors.
Right, yeah. I completely agree with you.
Yeah, it wasn't like Wizards of Waverly Place. It was like a Latino family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember though there was one episode where I was just totally cringed and kind of disappointed. I think Alex, so Selena Gomez's character, was learning Spanish from her mom. And like the whole time I was just thinking to myself, how come she doesn't know like Spanish already, right? Like, or she was kind of like making fun of the language. I think that's kind of what had made me upset. Like I remember vaguely she like held up a cup and her mom was like asking her, how do you say it in Spanish? And she goes, capito. And I was just like, oh my gosh, she did not just say that. And it kind of like hurt to watch that.
You just like cringed into the
Yeah, I
fifth
just
dimension.
I was like, that's the whitest thing you probably could have said. And like that just like, kind of like disrepresented Latinx culture in a way.
I mean, it's weird. It can happen, right? Like that, like over generations with like second generation, third generation immigrants.
Right.
Like the language can just go away. Like
Mhm.
I even though in my own home, my parents spoke Spanish and stuff, but then my siblings, they would speak English around each other because everyone went to like an English school, obviously.
Right.
And like I'm the fifth kid, so as the youngest person, I ended up kind of learning the least Spanish because like I never had to actually know Spanish.
Right.
And I had to like actually take like Spanish classes to like regain it and like actually learn the vocabulary and like grammar and stuff. So it's just weird, like, because it's like I really hope that I can be more fluent and like have my own children be fluent as well. But it's like some families, they'll just like lose the language or something.
Yeah, and I think with that episode that you were talking about, like, yeah, like Leslie was mentioning, sometimes the language just is lost over generations. But in the episode, it almost seemed like she didn't want to learn the language.
Exactly.
Like she was rejecting her culture rather than like making the effort to try and get to like know it. You know, it's not your fault when you don't grow up learning Spanish, but like don't reject your culture outright.
Yeah, for sure. It's just really cool to like grow up in like multiple cultures. I don't know why anyone would like reject one side, you know?
Right, yeah. It just makes you want to immerse in it even more. So yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, kind of leading into misrepresentations of Latinos in entertainment in general. Are there any other like films, TV, or anything like that that you can think of that do something like misrepresent Latinx people?
I guess just one film that just came to mind. I don't know if it necessarily directly misrepresents Latinx culture and community, but I think there are situations when, Latinx representation behind the camera isn't always accurately represented in front of it. I don't know if you guys have seen the film La Bamba, the movie about
It's about
yeah. So something that I had just learned, I think last year in my English class, we had kind of studied the film, which was kind of interesting for an English class, but something that I had found out is the director he's a Chicanx director, Luis Valdez. So he has kind of the background. He understands where Richie Valens comes from, growing up in California among Latino family. But what I found surprising was the guy who played Richie was actually a Filipino American actor named Lou Diamond Phillips. So that kind of just left me questioning or kind of like thinking about how was he the right person to play this role if he was a Filipino American. He wasn't Mexican American. He wasn't of Mexican Latinx origin. So I don't know what you guys think about that.
I think it's really interesting, right? Because like it's not even the first time that he was casted as someone that's Latinx, because he ended up doing like Stand and Deliver and stuff. I guess Hollywood doesn't really care or something like that when it comes to like who they actually are. It's like, all right, if you got the face, whatever.
It's interesting, like you kind of think about how they could have given a chance to so many other actors out there who are probably from, Chicanos who maybe would have been as talented, but they went with Phillips probably because he was, they knew his acting skills, they knew what he was capable of. He had probably played, like you said, Leslie, he played a Latino before. It's just an interesting conversation to have, and just an interesting thing to think about when it comes to representing ethnicities in the future of film. Like that's kind of where it starts, by hiring your actors and the people that you work with representing the same message, I guess, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, at least it wasn't like Scarlett Johansson, like in the movie, being like, "Oh,
yeah,
hello, mijo, I am your mother."
And I think it also can happen in the, I guess, I don't know if vice versa would be the right thing to say, but like oftentimes directors who aren't Latino or Latinx will try and tell stories of tell Latinx story.
Right. Yeah.
I guess kind of like an example would probably be when like Apocalypto would be an example, or Coco, exactly.
Yeah,
like
Coco, yeah.
I think there's an example of like how I guess it could be done well and how it can be done poorly.
Coco was a big surprise to me because, when I watched it, I didn't really know the backgrounds of the screenwriters or anything. But when I found out that, it was American guys, right? White guys that wrote the script.
I believe so, yeah.
I forgot their names. But I just remember like kind of learning that they had done very extensive research, which props to them for, actually going out and like doing field work in Mexico and like trying to learn the culture. But it kind of just, a little part of me was like, oh, like this isn't kind of based off of childhood experience or someone who actually based the story off of their own memories. But it was still like so well done. Like I still related to a lot of the concepts and like characters and everything in the film.
Well,
Yeah.
going off that, I think that they did do a lot of consulting with like people who were Latinx.
Yeah.
I don't know where I saw this. I think it was an interview or something like that, that someone had suggested, someone who was Latino had suggested that when the abuelita was like, originally I don't know if you guys remember that scene where she's holding like the chancla.
Mm-hmm.
But originally it was supposed to be another object, but someone who was Latino suggested it be a chancla. And to me, I guess that's a small detail that matters to like me, just because like that's something that is kind of, it hits home. Like I know that I've seen that, like it's like a joke, I guess, in our community, like hola chancla.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have some beef with Disney a little bit. Like, as someone that does animation stuff, I just see how like soulless like their remakes are and stuff. But like with Coco, it's like every single animated film, they have to shoehorn in that like narrative, like, look at me, I'm so different. Nobody likes me, but look how cute I am. You know, like every single one like has to be like, oh, I'm different. Yeah, it's just like it just gets tiring. And then I was watching that movie actually with my mom when we were watching it together, and they were in like the dead world or whatever. We got to that part where like this one guy is like forgotten or whatever and he disappears, and my mom's just like, they're already dead, why do they have to die again?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like with this stuff, it's like, yes, you can have all these people consulting for the film and stuff, but ultimately it's controlled by the people that are, the higher ups and the people that are trying to get merchandise out of it.
Yeah.
So it's just like, it
Yeah.
doesn't feel at the heart of it, it doesn't feel entirely authentic, because I don't know, it's just like Disney's gonna make, cute little sappy stories. So I guess like, the best thing to do is have more like independent films and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes like Latinx creators have to like kind of fight against like the studio to bring that kind of representation to the screen. Like going back to like Spy Kids, I know that Robert Rodriguez really had to like kind of push for them to be a Latino family, because I guess the studio higher ups thought that it wouldn't be like, I guess, get a lot of attention. It would be, I guess, too specific, and it wouldn't garner a lot of, like, the audience would be limited because majority cast was Latino. But one thing that Robert Rodriguez, I was watching an interview, he said that by being more specific, you're being more universal, and in the end he was successful in making that family be portrayed as Latino.
Period. Yeah. I like that. That is quote of the century.
I feel like with the entertainment industry, there's a big sentiment where it's like, oh, like, why do you want to make this character this ethnicity? Is it going to serve, like, are you going to make jokes out of it? Is it going to serve a story element? But it's like, no, it doesn't have to. You could just have a character be like Latinx or Black or whatever, and like, they're just them. It's just a person, it's just a character, and they don't have to be like a huge, I guess the more characters that we have that are just people that don't have to tell their specific jokes and show their specific culture every single time, you can have like a lot more varied storytelling.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to kind of the topic of cartoons, I know we had talked about Coco a little bit. I know there's so many more cartoons out there that I think do an interesting job at Latinx representation, especially for kids. I don't know if you guys want to talk about any of them or have any in mind, specifically TV shows, I think, or just movies in general.
One film that really stuck out to me when I was like a kid and I really didn't see a whole lot of like representation in cartoons and stuff, it was Dreamworks' El Dorado. That follows, it's like these, two funny guys from Spain accidentally stow away on this boat that goes to what they call the New World. And I don't know if it ever like specifies which like group it was, like whether it was like Mayans or Aztecs, or if it was kind of a mishmash. But I just really appreciated that it showed this civilization as something like really cool and like a place that you would want to go. like something
Yeah.
very just amazing and like magic. And it's like I remember like later I would learn like, oh yeah, I believe like the Aztecs started Tenochtitlan with like the story like of the eagle that flew onto the lake. And then
Yeah.
they just built a huge city onto this lake, and then they had all of the crops growing on the lake, and it's just like insane. Like what amazing like ideas and technology. And then the Mayans had like astrology and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like with El Dorado, it really showed like some of the really cool parts of I guess Mesoamerican culture and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And show them not as like what with like Pocahontas where it's like savages, oh no. They showed it as, you know, a really cool civilization. And even the people the Spaniards were like, oh, it'd be cool to just keep living here. Like not even as gods, like they don't think we're gods anymore, but just as people.
I agree with you completely. Like when I watched it as a kid, I was also like, damn, I want to travel back in time. I want to live like this. But at the same time, like every cartoon movie, it like romanticizes a couple of those things. But correct me if I'm wrong, Leslie. I don't think it was a Disney movie, right?
Yeah, I said DreamWorks.
DreamWorks. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So like double props to that, I guess. I don't know.
And I think around the same time, Disney was making Emperor's New Groove,
Yeah.
which when I saw that, I like didn't even recognize it as like I just felt like it was so far like divorced from the culture. Like you could forget that it was like based on the Incan Empire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I did not like, yeah, it was just so different that I didn't even realize what like they erased kind of a lot of the culture from it. I just didn't even realize what culture they were trying to be representing.
And I think it just I know like I loved the movies as a kid, but now looking back at them, like more involved in film and kind of just looking at representation in both films, like I just looked both of them up and like looking at the people who voice the characters, it's slightly disappointing. Like it's basically all white male, white female cast. Like in Emperor's New Groove, like Pacha was played by John Goodman, and like David's played Cusco. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of like, you know, that's when you can tell like there's still a lot that has to be done when we have like proper representation, like Latinx representation in films, you know. And like what we were saying before, like when you watch Emperor's New Groove, you kind of forget this is about Incan culture, you know, like it's Cusco, right? Cusco turns into a
Yeah.
llama.
Yeah.
You kind of forget he's supposed to be in like an alpaca or like you kind of forget. Yeah, I feel like there's, you know, it has great stories, but there's still a lot that's missing from the actual representation part.
Mhm.
Yeah. Disney in particular has this weird affinity for like turning their characters, like people of color, into like animals and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mhm.
and even with this new film coming out, Soul,
Oh
it's
yeah.
this like black jazz pianist guy. That's super
Uh-huh.
cool, right? But then he like dies in a way. And
Yeah.
like and
Yeah.
so I bet you that film is going to be mostly based on him like as a little floating blob soul, you know, and like you won't get to actually see his life as much.
Yeah. I'm kind of
Mhm.
nervous to watch that movie, not gonna lie. I think one interesting thing before we started the podcast, Maria had been kind of talking about. I don't know, Maria, you want to bring it up? Tell the
Oh,
listeners
yeah.
about it? Because this sounds so cool, you guys. I'm kind of excited.
Yeah, so I guess going off like animation, there's like not a lot of representation in general for people of color. And it is like talking about animation, but also in the anime community. And I think it's just really cool. There's gonna be this new show. It's gonna be a Crunchyroll original, and it's gonna be called Onyx Equinox. And I do have like the synopsis here, so I'm just gonna go ahead and like read that super quickly. So it's like a young Aztec boy named Izel is saved from death by the gods and is chosen to act as humanity's champion, forced to discard his apathy towards his fellow man and prove humanity's potential in a journey that will take him across ancient Mesoamerica. And just to me, that is like super cool and just super exciting that it's going to be just a representation, like they're gonna be such, like, excuse my language, but just badass characters. Like I can already
Go
see
ahead and
it.
say a badass character.
Yeah, just like, I don't know, I'm like, I have no words just because I'm so excited, like,
Yeah.
to see your culture be represented, and just like the culture of so many just like Latinos out there. It's just so cool, especially when it comes to like ancient, like Mesoamerica, like that's just, yeah.
And I think just like looking at the cast right now and like comparing it to what we were talking about, Emperor's New Groove, El Dorado, this is a very, Latinx represented cast. So that's also like another thing that's very inspirational to me. And like what you were saying, Maria, like I'm so excited for this to come out. I low key wish I was like 8 years old right now so I could be able to watch this movie and kind of look up to it as a child. Just I'm so excited for like the younger generation to watch this because it looks very promising.
Yeah, it seriously looks like so cool. And like, I just remember like when I was looking at, old ancient art of like, Mayan paintings and stuff like that, I was always wondering like, oh, what would it look like, if that was adapted into like 3D or like just with other like artistic interpretations. And I just feel like it's going to be so cool to like really watch this like mythos and like stories of these like gods and characters and stuff like actually interacting in 2020. That's just so cool.
Yeah, so it's to be coming. I think it's set to release on November 21st, so it's just gonna be really cool.
Yeah.
Oh dang, that's soon.
Yeah. So maybe by the time this podcast is out, maybe it'll be during the same time. So everyone listening out there, after you listen to this podcast, go watch that show because I know I definitely will. So I think with that, we've talked a lot, everything from action films, directors, Alfonso Cuarón, to cartoons and anime. So I think we've given like basic of just some of the Latinx films that are out there with Latinx representation, but there's so many more out there. So, I really want to encourage our listeners to just go outside of your comfort zone when it comes to watching films, just because there's so many stories out there that have so many special messages, both animation, fiction, action, anything. And you'll really be surprised at, the stories that you come across. They can be very meaningful and touching in so many ways. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have any closing points that you guys would like to make or leave our listeners with.
Support Latinx artists.
Yep.
Yeah, I think you guys put it perfectly. Like, we're starting to see more representation, and we just need to keep supporting those creators.
Yeah, for sure. Wait, what was the quote again? That we
The Robert Rodriguez quote?
Yeah.
He had said it was a part of a quote. He said, "By being more specific, you're being more universal."
All right, so I want all the listeners out there to remember that because I found that quote very deep, and so I think it means a lot. So yeah, I think with that, that's gonna let us come to a close to episode 7. I hope everyone out there enjoyed listening to what we had to say about Latinx film representation in the entertainment industry. If anyone has any suggestions out there for any more films that you guys have seen, definitely comment or let us know about them. We'd love to continue this conversation for so many more episodes. So yeah, thank you all for listening.